What's up, demons? It's me, your boy HMK. And if you are a Zelda fan, then you already know the latest rage is the Age of Calamity, a Hyrule Warriors game that takes place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild. I've been playing this game non-stop, and there's a lot to take in here, but one thing that we have to talk about is how Age of Calamity fits within the Zelda timeline. Because it does, don't worry. However, this is going to dive deep into very big spoiler territory. So if you're not down for spoilers, click off the video now. If you're ready to roll, let's get the hype flowing and dive directly into the noise. Alright, the first thing to get off the bat is that Age of Calamity is canon, but not canon. It's canon, but not, it's both. It's kind of both. I mean, timeline split. Yes, a timeline split happens in Age of Calamity. They even state it in the advice tag called Splintered Worlds. Okay, so the reason why I say Age of Calamity is canon but not canon and does fit within the Zelda timeline is because of the time travel that deals with TARawson. Yes, that's the name of the egg, TARawson. So the thing is, remember the beginning of Age of Calamity? That is legit within Breath of the Wild. The moment where Link falls and Zelda awakens her sealing power when they're trying to reach Fort Hateno. We know that scene. That actually does happen in Breath of the Wild, but the way this connects to Age of Calamity is that when the sealing power was awakened, TARawson woke up. And in order to go along with the wishes of Zelda, which we're gonna get into their relationship and how it works, TARawson opens a portal in time in order to go back in time, weeks, months, however, whatever time it takes in order to be before that of the Great Calamity. However, when this is happening, he is attacked by a guardian that has been infected with Ganon's malice. And as we saw in chapter 1, some of this malice gets through the portal. Now remember this, because this is very important. So thanks to TARawson jumping through time, Breath of the Wild still happens, but a timeline split occurs. Literally, TARawson pulls a Hero of Time when the timeline split happened in Ocarina of Time. And it's specifically stated in Splintered Worlds that the moment that TARawson went back in time, a new world was created. Once again, we're dealing with multiverse theory. Now this whole event is the first key that explains why he's missing overall to the Zelda lore, the Breath of the Wild lore, and the Breath of the Wild timeline. He is missing because evidently it turns out that the king hid him away from Zelda, because it turns out that Zelda made TARawson from parts of guardians and stuff when she was still a little child. And the reason why the king hid him away from her is because, oh, it's a toy, it's a distraction, you must focus on the sealing power, yada yada yada. Yeah. And due to him traveling through time, he became time displaced, so thus he disappeared from the original Zelda timeline, the original Breath of the Wild timeline, which explains why he's not there. Okay, I hope you're keeping up, because here is where things get a bit dicey. So now that TARawson went back to the past from the Breath of the Wild timeline, he now entered the Age of Calamity timeline, but that also means that another TARawson, the original TARawson to that Age of Calamity timeline, is there. And that explains the infected Malice TARawson, which in this game became known as Harbinger Ganon. This dark malice version of TARawson is the original TARawson that belonged within that timeline, not the time displaced one. The reason why it got infected is because the TARawson from the future carried some malice from the Breath of the Wild timeline, which resulted in the original TARawson to Age of Calamity being infected. And as the story goes, the original actual TARawson, Harbinger Ganon, gets destroyed, and the time displaced TARawson stays within this new timeline of Age of Calamity. So that's the big piece on why TARawson doesn't appear in Breath of the Wild, because he remained in the Age of Calamity timeline, which is the timeline split after he split from the Breath of the Wild line of events. But it doesn't stop there. Now, the reason why I keep saying that Age of Calamity is canon but not canon is because of another huge event that happens in chapter 5, and this is the huge spoiler thing. Now, the Calamity still follows through, and as we all know, the champions did fall within the Divine Beast to the Blight Ganons. Now, this was still set to go down, and it was looking pretty gruesome for the champions. However, in their last moment of need, they're each individually saved by what the community likes to call the new champions of Hyrule. Yes, Sidon saves Mipha, Teba saves Revali, Riju and Patricia save Urbosa, and Yunobu saves Daruk, effectively saving their lives in this timeline. Now, this is the second reason why I say this game is canon but not canon, is because these 4 individuals actually come from the Breath of the Wild timeline. This is brought about from them knowing their stories in the future, and of course coming from the future. Most importantly, each of them already knowing Link Well, kind of, from 100 years in the future. They're already aware of Link and have created their relationships, their individual relationships that we've seen in Breath of the Wild with Link at this moment in time. And of course, the big dead giveaway in which Sidon says when facing Water Blight Ganon that he will not let him take her away again. Of course, showing that each of the champions are already dead within the Breath of the Wild timeline. Now, this is really cool and actually pretty crazy because unlike Ocarina of Time, they don't actually travel back into the past. I mean, they do, but in actuality, they universe hop thanks to Terraco's power because they go back into a past that doesn't actually exist for them. But don't worry, the reasoning for how this can come about is actually pretty simple. They're using Terraco as a conduit, meaning since Terraco is time displaced and they're using the power of time travel thanks to Terraco, they were able to be time displaced and universe displaced thanks to Terraco by going to where Terraco is. So Age of Calamity is canon, but not canon at the same time, because it's a timeline split. The events of Breath of the Wild still happen because what we see in the beginning of Age of Calamity with Breath of the Wild's backstory on how Link fell, and of course the new champions coming from the future being aware of Breath of the Wild's events. And with that in mind, one of the golden questions is that the only bearing that this could have on Breath of the Wild 2 is that if the new champions remember the events of Age of Calamity, as the events of Age of Calamity won't directly affect Breath of the Wild 2 if the game were to take place after Breath of the Wild 1, which it's gonna, but it could still have consequences in other ways. Now, there's two more huge golden questions when it comes to the time travel and the timeline of Age of Calamity being explained. One of them is, how do I feel about it? Personally, I dig it. You know, I feel like it was a good way to dance around the notion of getting these characters from Breath of the Wild from the future playable in Age of Calamity and integrating them into the story in a very strong way. Showing the hope and the relationships of these characters interacting with their predecessors was a very enlightening experience. However, I will say this. The one thing I didn't like about this whole story of Age of Calamity with the time travel and whatnot is not even the time travel. The one thing I didn't like was the Yiga turning good. I thought that was pretty whack. I mean, sure, they're trying to avenge their comrades, but the whole 10,000 year legacy of the Yiga clan was to destroy the royal family, serve Calamity Ganon, praise Calamity Ganon, but you know, oh, you killed my best friend, now I'm gonna turn on all of that just to avenge them and then even become friends with everybody else. Nah, I didn't like that. I've got plenty more to say during my review, which is coming soon. Now, the other last golden question of the day when it comes to Age of Calamity, the spoilers, the story, the time travel, all that good jazz, is did Nintendo lie to us? Did Nintendo promise us something differently? Because many people believed, myself included once upon a time, that this was going to be a canon prequel to Breath of the Wild that will result in a trilogy along with Breath of the Wild 2 that will tell the events of the Great Calamity toe to toe leading into Breath of the Wild. And we didn't get that exactly, but when it comes to what Nintendo promised to us, when it comes to what's on the website and all that good jazz, they didn't lie to us. They still delivered what they were going to deliver. In a multitude of press releases and official media when it comes to Age of Calamity from Nintendo, they state, see Hyrule 100 years before The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and experience the events of the Great Calamity. Join the struggle that brought Hyrule to its knees. Learn more about Zelda, the Four Champions, the King of Hyrule, and more through dramatic cutscenes as they try to save the kingdom from calamity. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity is the only way to see firsthand what happened 100 years ago. And when it comes to that, we exactly got that in Age of Calamity. The Calamity still happened, it still took place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and we saw a glorious struggle in which Hyrule was brought down to its knees. And we even saw important events from Breath of the Wild's lore within Age of Calamity, albeit adapted. So in my take and understanding, we got what we were promised in a very interesting way. And honestly, I thought that Age of Calamity turned out fantastic. Especially, woo, that Calamity Ganon design from Age of Calamity. Bro, see Nintendo, that's how you design a final boss. Ooh, that was spicy. I remember the Zelda team, including Hidemaru Fujibayashi, the director of Breath of the Wild and Breath of the Wild 2, and Eiji Aonuma, the producer of the Zelda series and the game, did oversee this, supervise it, and had a hand in the story. So once again, Age of Calamity is canon and not canon at the same time, but borrows the best elements from Breath of the Wild and Zelda for this new timeline, the success timeline when it comes to Breath of the Wild's split timeline. But I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Expect a lot of cool content when it comes to Age of Calamity, Breath of the Wild, and going forward into Breath of the Wild 2. I'm super excited. So with that being said, be sure to like, favorite, share, and most importantly, subscribe to your boy HMK for more Zelda content every week. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping making this video happen. If you want to find out how you can support HMK for just $1 a month, check out my info in the description box below. Alright guys, until the next video, this has been HMK, and I'll check you guys later.